Imagine building something from nothing, only for your own mother to tell you that you owe it to the son she's always loved more. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Ryan, and I never thought the people who raised me would become the ones who tried to take away everything I built. Growing up, my mom, Marla, treated my brother Jace like he could do no wrong. I was always the one told to understand, to give in, to step aside. When I turned 19, I left home and worked non-stop until I finally opened my own little furniture business. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and I built it piece by piece with my own hands. Years later, I went home for dinner, thinking it was just a normal visit. Instead, my mom announced that I should hand my business over to Jace so he could finally have a future. When I said no, she told me she would disown me if I didn't do the right thing. Then Jace admitted he had tried to transfer part of my business to himself using my old documents. My mom helped him, saying he deserved a chance more than I did. That night I cried harder than I had in years, but I didn't give up. I met with a lawyer and protected everything legally. Jace got into trouble for what he tried to do, and my mom blamed me, but I walked away anyway. I chose myself. Now I run my business in peace, and for the first time in my life, I know my worth, without needing their approval. I grew up in a small town called Cedar Bluff, tucked between quiet roads and long stretches of fields. My family lived in a modest house on a corner lot, the kind where everyone knew who belonged there. My mother, Marla, moved through life with sharp opinions and louder expectations. My father, Dean, was gentle but distant, always trying to keep the peace without ever standing up for anything. Then there was my older brother, Jace, the one who seemed to shine without even trying. From as far back as I can remember, the air in our home shifted around him. If he wanted something, it appeared. If he slipped up, the blame floated away before it touched him. I watched this pattern take shape long before I understood it. When I needed help, I heard phrases meant to soften denial. When he needed something, doors swung open. It wasn't spoken outright, but the message settled into me, his needs mattered more. Simple things at home reminded me of it. If chores were uneven, I was told to accept it. If he forgot a task, I was told he was tired. If I forgot, it became a lesson about responsibility. When he took over conversations, I was nudged to let him finish. When I spoke, I learned to pause, because no one waited for my sentences. Moments like these weren't dramatic, but they etched themselves quietly into my memory. Despite that, I tried hard to keep balance. I didn't want to resent him, though sometimes the weight of unfairness felt heavy in ways I didn't know how to explain. I told myself it was normal, that families were supposed to work this way. Back then, I had no idea how deeply those early years would shape everything that came after. Leaving home at 19 felt like stepping into a world that didn't care whether I succeeded or fell apart. I had no plan except to stay afloat, so I took whatever work I could find. In the mornings, I stocked shelves at a small hardware store. After that, I cleaned offices until the sun went down. On weekends, I waited tables at a diner where my feet never stopped aching. It wasn't glamorous, but I needed every paycheck. What kept me going was a quiet idea I carried with me, something that felt like mine. I loved shaping wood, sanding rough edges, and turning plain boards into pieces that felt warm and alive. When I wasn't working, I sketched designs on scrap paper and practiced in borrowed spaces. Eventually, I saved enough to rent a tiny workshop behind an old auto lot. It smelled of dust and motor oil, but it was a place where I could breathe. I named my business Rhinewood, a name that reminded me of starting fresh. At first, hardly anyone noticed what I made. I crafted small tables, stools, and shelves, hauling them to weekend markets and hoping someone would stop long enough to look. Sometimes I sold one piece. Sometimes none. But I kept showing up. Little by little, things began to shift. A local boutique asked if I could make a custom counter. A cafe wanted wooden benches. People started recognizing my style, simple lines, sturdy build, a touch of warmth. Orders came slowly, but they came consistently. Each project pushed me to work late into the night, sanding until my arms felt numb and staining until my eyes burned. Every step forward reminded me I didn't need anyone's approval to build something meaningful. Rhinewood grew because I refused to give up, and each finished piece felt like a promise to myself that I would never return to a life where my worth depended on someone else's choices. As the years moved on, Jace's path started breaking apart in ways no one in our house wanted to admit. He had grown up hearing he had a special spark, that he was meant for remarkable things, so he chased every idea that crossed his mind. First, he enrolled in a trade program, convinced it would launch him into something steady, but he quit before finishing the first term. After that, he tried selling homes, certain he would thrive at it, but he barely lasted a season. Then he drifted into late-night service work, jumping behind counters in different places, never staying long enough to find his footing. Every time one attempt crumbled, he brushed it off like it didn't matter. The pattern became predictable: big enthusiasm, a burst of effort, then a sudden drop when things got hard. With each restart, he spent money he didn't have, convinced he would earn it back once he hit his stride. Instead, the unpaid bills piled up. He borrowed from friends, from neighbors, even from distant relatives who expected him to change course. Instead, he promised them he was on the verge of something better. Through it all, my mother refused to see any fault. She slipped him checks, covered overdue notices, and told him he just needed time to find his direction. If anyone suggested he take responsibility, she stepped in before the words could sink in. She spoke about his potential, insisting setbacks were temporary. Meanwhile, the numbers he owed only grew, and his choices became more reckless as he tried to keep up appearances. Watching it from the outside felt like witnessing a structure slowly tilt, inch by inch, while everyone around it pretended nothing was wrong. He drifted further from reality, convinced things would somehow fix themselves, and my mother held on to that belief even more tightly than he did. I drove to my parents' place expecting an ordinary evening. The house felt the same as always, the porch light buzzing faintly, the smell of something warm drifting from the kitchen. I thought we'd talk about simple things, maybe share a meal and catch up. Nothing about the night hinted at what waited for me. We sat down at the table, plates barely touched, when the air changed. My mother straightened in her chair with a kind of certainty that made my stomach tighten. She looked at me as if she had already rehearsed every word she was about to say. My father stayed quiet, eyes fixed on his fork, while Jace lounged back like he was settling in for a show. Without any lead-up, she announced that it was time for a serious conversation. Then she said something that made the room feel smaller. She believed any venture tied to the family should belong to the man who will carry things forward. She didn't even try to soften it. She claimed Jace needed direction, needed something steady, and that I should hand over everything I had built so he could have a real start. I sat there stunned, trying to understand if she truly meant it. She spoke as if my effort, my long hours, and every sacrifice I had made were just stepping stones for someone else. She described it like a natural order, something I should accept without hesitation. Jace didn't look embarrassed or surprised. He stared at me with an expression that suggested he felt entitled to what she was asking for. I searched my father's face for any sign of disagreement, but he didn't lift his eyes. My mother waited for my answer like it was a formality, convinced I would bend to her expectations just as she believed I always had. That night, the truth landed hard. They weren't asking me for anything. They were telling me what they thought I owed. The moment I told her I wasn't giving up my work, the calm she tried to hold on to snapped. Her chair scraped against the floor as she leaned forward, eyes blazing in a way I had never seen directed at me before. She spoke my name like it was an offense, as if my refusal had revealed something deeply wrong about me. The room felt colder, the space between us sharp and dangerous. She rose from her seat and said that if I didn't agree, I would no longer be considered part of the household at all. She laid it out with a harsh certainty, warning me that I would lose every connection I had if I didn't sign papers she expected me to accept without question. She acted as though my choice was a betrayal of everything she believed a daughter should be. My father stayed silent, shoulders tense, unable to look at either of us. Her words kept coming, each one cutting deeper. She claimed I didn't truly rely on the business I had built, that I could move on easily while someone else needed it more. She spoke as though my hours, my work, my struggles had no real weight. Then she added something that struck me harder than the threat itself. She said that people like me weren't meant to build something lasting on their own, that foundations and futures should be directed by someone else. In her mind, I was stepping out of place. Jace didn't intervene. He watched, waiting, almost certain my resistance would break under the pressure she was putting on me. But I stayed firm, even as my chest tightened and my hands shook under the table. Standing there, with her anger filling every corner of the room, I understood the line she had drawn. She wasn't trying to guide me. She was punishing me for daring to claim something as mine. Before I could gather myself, Jace leaned forward with a smirk that made my skin crawl. He said there was something I should probably know. His tone wasn't apologetic or nervous. It was smug, like he believed the outcome was already sealed. Then he announced that he had taken steps to move things along without waiting for my agreement. He pulled a folded packet from his jacket and tapped it against the table. He explained that he had already sent in forms claiming a portion of my work as his own. My breath caught when he said he used information taken from papers my mother had kept locked away for years. Documents from when I was young, things I never imagined anyone would touch. Hearing that he had rifled through them without hesitation made my stomach twist. I looked at my mother, hoping she would deny it, but she didn't even flinch. Instead, she admitted she had opened the drawer for him. She said it calmly, as though helping him use my personal information was no big deal. She insisted he needed every advantage he could get and that giving him access was simply an act of goodwill. Her reasoning was that he deserved a fair start, something she claimed I could afford to give. My father closed his eyes, but still said nothing. Jace went on about how the process was already underway, how he expected everything to shift smoothly once my signature followed. He talked like it was inevitable, like I was just an obstacle delaying what he believed should naturally belong to him. Hearing them justify it, seeing how easily they crossed a boundary I never imagined they would touch, felt like a ground giving way beneath me. In that moment, I understood they hadn't simply chosen him over me, they had planned this long before I walked through the door. I stumbled out of the house before I said something I couldn't take back. The night air hit me like a wall, sharp and cold, and my hands shook so badly I could barely hold the keys. I slid into the driver's seat, head resting against the wheel, and let the reality of what had just happened crash over me. Everything I thought I could count on, my family, their support, their loyalty, had vanished in a single evening. The streets of Cedar Bluff blurred past as I drove without direction, tears spilling freely, hot and silent. Every memory of my childhood, every quiet hope that they cared for me for who I was, collided with the stark truth: they only valued what I could give, what I could produce, what I could sacrifice. I felt small, hollow, and completely exposed. I ended up at a friend's apartment, the kind of friend who never asked questions and let me disappear into silence. I curled up on their couch, staring at the ceiling while my mind replayed every word, every look, every betrayal. I realized that the people I had trusted most didn't see me as their daughter, only as a tool, a stepping stone for someone else's benefit. That night stretched endlessly, each hour heavier than the last. I wasn't angry yet, not fully, but I felt the weight of abandonment pressing down on me, a sorrow I hadn't known I could carry. Lying there, I understood something crucial: no one would fight for me if I didn't fight for myself. My family's love had strings attached, and I had finally seen the limits of it. For the first time, I felt both broken and awake, ready to confront the truth I had been avoiding for years. The next morning, I refused to let despair dictate my actions. I contacted an attorney I had heard about through a trusted friend, Cole. When I met him in his office, I explained everything: the threats, the stolen documents, and the attempt to take over my business. He listened without interrupting, taking notes carefully, his calm presence already giving me a sense of control I hadn't felt in days. Cole outlined a plan that made my chest tighten with hope. We would secure every corner of my work legally, making it impossible for Jace to claim a single piece of it. He helped me file complaints for the misuse of my personal information, explaining in detail how the law could protect me from their manipulations. For the first time since the confrontation, I felt a path forward. We moved quickly, tightening every loophole, updating contracts, and reinforcing ownership records. Cole guided me through each step, explaining how to safeguard not only the business itself but also the financial accounts tied to it. I began to feel my agency return, a sense of purpose replacing the numbness that had kept me frozen the night before. By the time the papers were filed and protections secured, I felt like a different person. The power I had given away through fear was being reclaimed piece by piece. I realized that revenge didn't mean destruction, it meant asserting my rights, protecting my work, and making sure that no one could manipulate me again. With Cole's guidance, I was no longer vulnerable. I was prepared, fortified, and ready to confront any attempt to undermine what I had built, finally turning the tables on those who thought they could take what was mine. It didn't take long for the consequences of their actions to catch up with them. Authorities contacted Jace, questioning him about the documents he had tried to submit and the attempts to claim a portion of my business. He looked flustered and defensive, unable to maintain the confident mask he had worn at home. The mistakes he had thought would go unnoticed were finally being exposed, and he struggled to explain himself. Meanwhile, my mother realized what I had done. She discovered that I had completely cut off any access they had to my accounts, files, and records. Her panic was visible, her voice shaking as she demanded explanations, insisting she only wanted what was best for the family. Her composure, always so certain, had crumbled in the face of the legal protections I put in place. Jace's financial troubles came to light as well. Creditors began calling, debts he had ignored or assumed someone else would cover now pressing him relentlessly. He tried to maneuver out of it, but every attempt only revealed how unprepared he truly was. Through it all, my mother directed her anger at me, calling me cold and heartless, accusing me of destroying the family she had built in her mind. But I didn't respond. I stayed quiet and watched as the consequences unfolded, knowing that I had done everything I could to protect myself. For the first time, I saw the reality of their choices. Entitlement and excuses could only carry someone so far, and now the reckoning had arrived. I went back to their house knowing this would be the final time. The air felt heavy as I stepped inside, memories pressing down from every corner. I didn't hesitate or falter, every step was deliberate, carrying the weight of the nights I had spent rebuilding my strength. I found my mother in the living room, her expression cautious, as if she suspected I had changed. Jace lingered nearby, uncertain, watching silently. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. I spoke clearly and firmly, each word measured. I told her I would no longer allow anyone to manipulate me with guilt or fear. The cycle of control that had haunted my life was over. I reminded her that love should never be conditional. I explained that loyalty and respect are earned, not demanded, and that trying to take what belonged to me didn't make her right, it exposed her own failures. Every attempt to sway me, every excuse she had made for Jace, no longer held any power over me. Then I told them both what mattered most: Rhinewood is mine. Everything in that business, from the smallest detail to the largest project, was built with my hands, my energy, and my persistence. No amount of favoritism or interference could erase that. I made it clear that I would protect it, and that my claim was unshakable because I had earned it through sacrifice and determination. I left the room not with anger, but with certainty. I had faced them, spoken my truth, and drawn a line they could not cross. For the first time, I felt the freedom of standing fully in my own power, unafraid and unapologetic. The house no longer held me captive, and I knew nothing could take away what I had built for myself. I made the decision to walk away completely, leaving behind the house, the familiar streets, and the people who had tried to control me. I found a small, sunlit space on the outskirts of town and signed a lease for a new workshop. It wasn't large, but it was mine, and for the first time, the walls felt welcoming instead of suffocating. I started fresh, organizing my tools, arranging the workspace exactly how I wanted it, and setting up a schedule that honored my energy and creativity. Slowly, I hired 2 dedicated employees who shared my vision and respect for the craft. Together, we began producing pieces that carried my name and my standards, expanding Rhinewood beyond what I had imagined possible. Each day, I felt a lightness that had been absent for years. There was no tension waiting in corners, no unspoken demands, no sense of being constantly judged. Decisions were mine to make, and every choice reminded me that I was finally accountable only to myself. I discovered a rhythm in the work, a peace in knowing that my effort directly shaped my success. Even simple things, like locking the workshop doors at night without fear of interference, felt liberating. I could plan, dream, and create without hesitation or compromise. The stress, manipulation, and disappointment of the past no longer defined my life. Living independently taught me more than just business skills, it showed me how to value myself and my work on my own terms. Each finished piece became a symbol of resilience, each successful order a confirmation that I was capable of building my life exactly the way I wanted. For the first time, I felt a profound sense of freedom, steady, quiet, and entirely my own. Several months later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. The envelope was familiar, my mother's handwriting sprawled across the front with that practiced neatness she always favored. I hesitated before opening it, my heart uneasy but curious. Inside me whispered caution. I did some digging quietly, careful not to act hastily, and discovered the truth: Jace had declared bankruptcy again. Marla wasn't reaching out because she truly regretted her actions or wanted to repair our relationship. She was worried about appearances, about protecting him from the consequences he refused to face, and about the tangled mess of finances she had shielded him from for years. I folded the letter back into its envelope and slid it into a drawer. Not out of anger or revenge, but because I no longer needed validation from the family that had tried to control me. For the first time, I realized that choosing myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. I had spent years bending, giving, and hoping for love that had always been conditional. Now, I didn't have to. I returned to my workshop, breathing in the familiar scent of sawdust and oil, the quiet hum of machines around me, and the sense of peace that only comes from building something truly your own. Every table, shelf, and stool I created was a reminder that my effort, my vision, and my perseverance belonged to me and no one else. I walked through the space, feeling the weight of the past lift slightly with each step, knowing that the legacy I was crafting would never be taken, manipulated, or questioned again. It was mine, entirely, and for the first time, that was enough. Hey besties! Thanks for sticking with me till the end of this intense story. Growing up, I was always overlooked while my brother got all the praise. Years later, my own mother tried to take my business from me to give him a head start. The betrayal cut deep, but it sparked a strength I didn't know I had. I fought back, rebuilt my life, and finally claimed my freedom. If this touched you, like, share, comment, and subscribe for more. See you next time.